right place. If you're here, what we're going to be doing today is talking about applying to research positions. Like Dr. Lustig said, there's going to be one more in the future, but for today, we're really going to be focusing on how to avoid some of those like rookie mistakes that may not be obvious, that no one may have ever like taught you or talked about in looking into research positions. And so one of the terms we sometimes use is something called the hidden curriculum. It's basically the things that are helpful to know in the research world that oftentimes aren't explicitly taught. And so we're really hoping that this workshop is going to help uncover some of those things for you so that you have more success in applying for research opportunities. So to get started, we just wanted to point you in the direction of some resources. A previous workshop was how to get involved in research. And so that also is super informative and helpful if you're looking to explore this. So there's a link in here, and Dr. Lustig also just posted that in the chat for the workshop that the same program that you're here for right now, the Star Scholars program, put together. So go ahead and check that out if you haven't seen it yet. So what are we actually going to talk about today? We're going to cover a number of different topics that are broadly listed out here. The first is that we're going to discuss how to get involved with research in your area. We'll talk about opportunities specific to the University of Michigan, but also ones that exist elsewhere, because we know that some of you are coming from other places all around the country or the world, and there are lots of opportunities all over. We're also going to discuss different types of RA positions or research assistant positions. We'll walk through the typical process for applying to those. And then finally, we'll talk about what happens if you don't get one this cycle, and we'll talk about some tips that you might want to consider for boosting your ability to achieve one of those in the future. So just a little bit about me, since I didn't give you an intro yet. So my name is Jessica Bizik. I am a fourth year in the clinical psychology doctoral program here at the University of Michigan. I have a little bit of my research journey described here for you. And so, sorry, the text is a little small on this slide, but I'll walk through the different steps. So everyone's path looks a little bit different, but this is what mine looked like. I started out at a small liberal arts college. I majored in neuroscience there, and I was involved in a research lab starting in my sophomore year. The summer after my sophomore year, I actually came to the University of Michigan for what was called an REU, or a research experience for undergraduates. So that was a 10-week program, and not 10 years, where I was involved with a research lab here at Michigan. I got to present a poster and get involved in another lab. Then I went back to undergrad. I finished out, undergrad. I did a senior research project. I did another summer internship at the Mount Sinai Med School in New York City, where I worked in a different research lab. And then after I graduated from undergrad, I went to the National Institute of Mental Health, where I completed a 2-year post-baccalaureate research assistant program, where I worked in a lab that studied anxiety disorders in children and understanding psychotherapy treatments for them, as well as some of the neurocognitive mechanisms that relate to anxiety. And then I applied to graduate school and I landed here. So I just gave you my spiel about my path, but as you can imagine, everyone's path is going to look a little bit different. And so we have this graphic here just to remind you that there are a lot of different routes to get to a PhD program or whatever kind of program you might be aspiring toward. And no two paths are alike, which means that no one path is really better than the other. It's going to be finding out what works best for you. So to start out, you're here because maybe you want to get involved in a research opportunity. Let's first talk about how we can find them. So the first thing that we want to talk about is being really concrete as to where research opportunities can be found, right? As you know, psychology research takes place primarily in psychology departments at colleges or universities, but a lot of the topics that are key to psychology are also covered in other academic disciplines. So I think we can advance and see what else is on the slide, if that's okay. All right. So it's kind of all described here. I know it's a lot of text, but I'll kind of walk you through these different things we've outlined here. So as I said, psychology departments are going to be a really key place to explore research opportunities. But if you're interested in psychology, there might be other areas of interest to you that are in places like public health schools or business schools, in the social sciences like poli-sci, social work. I'm a clinical student, so I interface a lot with med schools. There's nursing schools that do research. And then also cognition and computational science is going to involve a lot of topics that are very relevant to psychology as well. So these are all different areas where you may be able to explore research positions. And then finally, there's also academic positions, or rather research settings outside of academia. So there are both public and private institutions, things like government agencies, think tanks, private firms, schools, community organizations, right? So there are really just many avenues, I think, is the main goal that we want to get at. And also the bullet that we have here about lab settings also highlights that there's many different places you can engage in research. So even within one psychology department, there's going to be people doing animal research. There'll be people working with humans. There's, more cognitive sciences. There's a lot of different arenas, I guess you'd say, that you can get involved in. So moving on to the types of positions that are available, we want to highlight that, especially in the undergraduate realm, there might be opportunities to get credit for research. So some labs will hire on research assistants, and in kind of exchange for working in that lab, you will be enrolling in a specific course number and you'll be getting credit. Typically, there isn't really formal coursework. It's more so that you are being supervised by a lab manager, a grad student in that lab, and you are contributing to the research being done in that lab. Sometimes there are also opportunities to be involved in work study. So depending on your financial aid packages, what's available at your university, there might be a mechanism by which you can be involved in research through work study. There also might even be paid opportunities. So these might be ones that give you what would be called a stipend or some kind of hourly pay. And then, as I highlighted in my path, one of the things that I did was internships. And so these are sometimes paid, sometimes not. They can often be over the summer. They can also occur during the school year. But those are another way that you can get involved in research. And then lastly, there's always volunteering opportunities. I think it's very common for labs to have volunteers and to not really have the funds to pay those volunteers, but they are eager to have people helping out with research. And so a lot of research assistant positions do take the form of volunteer work. Next, because we're at U of M, we did want to highlight some U of M specific opportunities.
Yeah, so some of these are specific to Michigan students. Some of them are opportunities that are open to everybody, or, and may even prefer to bring in students who are from outside. So the first one is the Undergraduate Research Opportunities Program. The Michigan one is specific to Michigan students. However, I should say there are other schools that have very similar programs. So I would say, Google that and look in your school or talk to your school advising office. And often there will be some kind of meetings that you'll attend for the Year Up program, but then you will also basically have a certain number of hours that you will work through the lab. And I know here at Michigan, at least, the Year Up program, it can either be for just sort of as a sort of mix of volunteer and class credit, or they do also have the work study options. We have here, and again, most institutions will have something like this, some kind of independent study. So this will be where you're working closely either with a faculty member or oftentimes your real day-to-day supervisor as a graduate student. And they'll be helping you either, like, you'll usually start off working on a project that's pretty closely related to what your graduate student mentor is doing. and they may have you, helping to collect data, helping to read, about the literature and collect the background of it, you know, interviewing the subjects. Like there's all kinds of different skills that you will learn through that independent study. And typically that will start off, you'll kind of start off with the lower level ones where you're doing pretty basic skills. And then, as you go on, you sort of graduate to higher versions of it, and then you become more and more independent with it. And often that can sometimes lead to doing a thesis. The Summer Research Opportunities Program. So this would be the one at Michigan is for students who are not at Michigan, and especially those of you who are at some smaller schools where maybe you don't have a huge research program in your psychology department. You can apply to this, and then you will come to Michigan or to some of the other Big Ten schools, and you will work in a research lab over the summer. This one is also really nice because it will pay for you to take GRE classes. And so it also provides you a place to live over the summer and a small stipend. So if you're not at Michigan and you're interested in coming here, I definitely encourage you to apply to that program. There's the Student Opportunities for AIDS and HIV Research, SOAR. So this is for juniors and seniors at Michigan. And then MSpice is a summer program that takes both students at Michigan and from the outside on fellowship. I will say I talked to the organizers of it. They're waiting to hear back on their funding. So they said, keep an eye on our website and see if we'll be open this upcoming year. Another one I did want to highlight, just as a way of saying like that, is Jess was saying that there are different opportunities also outside of the psychology department. If you're interested in anything that involves more neuroscience, so working with animals or working with patient populations, working on brain imaging sorts of things, the neuroscience program here also has a ton of research opportunities for the summer. Some of these are for Michigan students. Again, some of them are for bringing in students from outside the university. If you notice, if you're interested in this Siren Neuro one, they actually have an information session that starts pretty much right after we finish up. So I encourage you to check that one out tonight. And again, you can go basically to this link or just Google, UMich Siren Neuro, and you'll find the link there and you'll see a whole list of opportunities that they have. There are also a bunch of nationwide opportunities. The National Science Foundation, it sponsors a lot of the REUs that Jess was talking about. The Big Ten has a version of it. Again, it sponsors a lot of things like SROP. So just Google Big Ten Summer Research Opportunities Psychology, and you should be able to find that. APA has a number of them as well. I'm not here we go. So yeah, again, these are the Summer Research Opportunity. That's a big one. Oops. Just to look out for some of those deadlines. So you may have missed the first one, but double check for that second one. NSF, here you'll have to take a look at what it is at the individual schools that you'll be interested in visiting. And then this APA website lists a ton of undergraduate research opportunities, and it's frequently updated. So that one, again, I would find the site just through Google and then just make a note to sort of check it, especially through November, December, and January, because as programs sort of update their applications and update their deadlines, you'll see more and more listed there. And then this is an amazing list that somebody who is just a psychology graduate student, I think she's now a postdoc, puts together. And she just basically scours Twitter, people send her stuff. It has a lot of summer research opportunities for those of you who may be graduating and looking for post-bac work or for graduate school openings. It has listings there too. So again, I just encourage you bookmark that and keep an eye on it, and you'll see a ton of useful info there. We also compiled this Google Sheet. This was put together by one of our STAR alumni a couple of years ago. So some of the deadlines may have changed, but my suggestion to you would be read through the entire sheet, find the 5 or so programs that you're most interested in, and then do a little bit more in-depth research on those. Take a look at their website, see if they've updated their deadlines and their applications. And if not, just make yourself a note to circle back in a couple weeks and see when they have that information available. Um, there's too many on here. You're not going to be able to apply to them all. So again, scan through the list, find about 5 that seem like they might be a good fit for you, and then really concentrate your efforts on applying to those.
Great. Okay, so once you've done some research to figure out what kind of positions you might want to apply to, we wanted to highlight some next steps in actually submitting some applications. So maybe you can just advance, we can get everything on the slide. Okay, great. So there are a couple different steps. We're going to go through each of these in depth. They're going to include defining your interests or goals, narrowing your options based on what will fit your interests, expressing interest to the people who are running those research programs or labs, and then finally actually applying. So how do we start out with defining our interests and our goals? The first thing that we already highlighted earlier is that no two paths are alike, meaning that everyone is going to have their own unique interests and paths to find those interests. A couple things that you can think about in order to narrow this down is what your ultimate goal is. Obviously, this can change. There's no right answer, but a couple of things you might be considering as you're defining those interests are things like, do you want to go to graduate school? Do you think you might be interested in teaching or doing research full time? And what kind of things do you want to work with and work on? So you could do research focused with human populations. You could specialize in kids, adults, elderly adults. You could work with animal models. You could do more bio-based research that's in like a lab setting. There are a lot of different options, right? There are also a couple different ways to think about this. So one of the best ways, I think, is to consider what just like excites you, So thinking back to the classes that you've taken, to volunteer opportunities you've been involved in, what did you like? What were the things that kind of made you excited and that you felt motivated to go to? And what were the things that you were like, that class was my least favorite class, and why, right? Think about those things. Also, what fits your current goals? So we're going to talk a little bit more about, is it clear or is it unclear? We all kind of have to start somewhere, right? So all of us, I think, start with some level of not being clear, but we can move ourselves in the direction of being a little clearer. So yeah, a little bit more on what we mean by that. An unclear goal might mean that we don't really have a sense of what we like may want to do. And there's all these pieces that we still are considering. So what have we gained exposure to? What are the skills that we have or that we want to gain? And what do we want to learn? And all of those pieces come together to create a more concrete goal. So we just have an example here of ways that you might know and decide, this is the type of grad school I want to go to, and this is what I'm interested in studying. So for this example, right, you would narrow down, okay, there are 2 to 3 things I'm really interested in. For developmental psych, maybe it's like how children develop like morality or something. That could be a developmental research question. Then you would find the labs that are studying like moral processes, development in kids. Then you would start building the skills to prepare yourself to be a competitive candidate for a graduate program. And then finally, you would make sure to get recommendation letters that reflect your skills and your interest in this area. That's a lot more defined. But this is still kind of an amorphous process, right? So first we talked a little bit about reflecting on the classes you've taken or the volunteer opportunities. There are also some more concrete things that you can do. For example, this is a book called Designing Your Life. We have a link in the slides here that you can reference that has some free worksheets where you can do these activities to help you better kind of crystallize those interests. So, for example, you can do activities relating to like what makes you feel energized, what you want your work life to look like. And there are many other different books and resources out there. So, things within this realm can be kind of an avenue for defining your interests. And then a lot of what we talk about is fit, especially when we talk about the PhD research application process. So, fit really has to do with how well you fit with a lab, right? The first thing that you might want to consider is the lab itself. So, are they studying things that you think are exciting, that make you kind of have questions that you might want to look deeper into? Do you or what are the like mentor supervisor structures, the graduate student or the principal investigator, the PI? What are they doing and studying? What would be your responsibilities in that lab, and what would be the commitment? So yeah, what kind of like jobs would you be filling, and how frequently do you have to be there? There's also culture. So, are there other undergraduates that have worked in that lab? Do they have journal clubs where they get together and read articles? Are they encouraging of their undergraduates in developing skills that they can apply more independently? And then lastly, what does mentorship look like? So, would you be working more with undergraduates who are more senior in the lab? They've been there for longer. Would you be working with graduate students, even postdoc fellows? There could be a lot of different ways that mentorship could look. So one of the first steps, right, once you've defined these goals a little bit more and figured out a lab maybe that you want to apply to, you need to express interest to that lab. And so one of the most common mistakes is contacting the principal investigator or the PI. That's the person highlighted with that big arrow in this picture. So this is a real lab at Michigan, Dr. Jill Becker. She's in the biopsychology area. And as you can see, she has a large team. And so a lot of her job is running the lab, managing that team. And so there are actually a lot of people within the lab that would be a better fit for contacting. The first person that we would recommend you contact would be the lab manager, because they oftentimes are the people who are actually coordinating the lab work. Sometimes labs have undergraduate coordinators who actually are like very responsible for the undergraduate research assistants. So they might be even more informed than some of the people that are more senior in the lab. There's also graduate students, so they are going to be involved in a number of different projects. They may need help in conducting those projects, and so that's where research assistant positions are often filling that space. Postdoctoral students are basically individuals who have received their PhD and are now kind of somewhere in between graduate student and principal investigator. So they are going to have these advanced research skills. They're going to be managing projects, but they oftentimes have more time to mentor because they're not the one solely responsible for the lab. And then finally, there's the faculty member or the principal investigator. They are the busiest person. They are responsible for everyone. And so they get a lot of emails. So basically, we would, try to be clear and concise when you contact these people. We're going to look at sample emails, but this is a good kind of order to consider contacting. And you can look at lab web pages or student faculty pages, such as the link we have here for University of Michigan, in order to actually find the names of these people to email them. So, what do we say in an email? Well, as we already highlighted, people receive a lot of emails. So the best thing is to be concise. You don't want to write like 4 paragraphs when you are emailing someone. So we're saying 4 to 5 sentences would be ideal. You want to be prepared, right? Just like anything in life, it's always good to show up with some, knowledge and preparation. And so some ways to do that would be to check recent publications from the lab. Looking at the lab website is a great way, even if it's not fully up to date. Oftentimes it does still have some like core elements of who's in the lab and what they're doing. And then also the faculty's department page that you can find on the internet. You want to be clear and direct. So you want to be clear as to why you're contacting them, avoid really vague things, being clear that you're interested in getting involved in a research project. And then tending towards formality. So, these are individuals who, like we said, they have a lot of responsibilities, and they oftentimes are, they have a PhD, they're further along in their career. We just want to be polite and respectful that we're contacting them and requesting some time from them to read our email. So we want to use formal addresses like Dr., Mr., Ms. And then we don't want to use casual language. Graduate students will typically be Mr. or Ms. Because they do not have a PhD yet. PIs will be doctor, as well as most postdocs as well. So let's look at some sample emails. This first one is going to be an example of a strong email. So it says, "Hello, Dr. Block. I am a sophomore majoring in psychology with a minor in biological sciences. I read about your ACT lab, and I think the social desirability experiment on your website is very interesting. Are you currently accepting RAs? Please let me know the process involved with getting involved in your lab. I have attached my resume for your convenience. Thank you, your name." So this really hits on every point of the previous slide that I just highlighted, clearly addresses the recipient, they show that they know a bit about the lab, and they clearly ask that they are, interested in knowing whether there might be research assistant positions available. On the flip side, we have an example of what would not be ideal to do. So this one says, "Hi, Sam. I've heard that it's good to get involved in research for anyone who might want to go to medical school. I'm a sophomore and I found your lab information through the psychology website. Can you tell me about your research? Do you think it's worthwhile for undergraduates? Name." So this one has a number of clear issues. The first one is that they address the recipient by their first name. There are also a number of typos in here, and they're asking the recipient to educate them on the lab. So they're asking them, is your lab worthwhile? What do you study? When these are things that you, as the person asking, should be doing your homework on ahead of time. And generally, you don't want someone to have to prove to you why their research is meaningful, right? They already, think that it's cool, and you should do your work to figure out, why that is. Okay, and you should notice, or maybe you noticed that in that first example, they said, "I've attached my resume," right? And so at this stage, it's fine to have a resume instead of a curriculum vitae or a CV. Generally in research, we often end up having a CV, like for individuals who are involved in the research space for longer. But we've highlighted some key differences here just because the distinction is something that sometimes people don't learn. So for a resume, these tend to be a lot shorter. They're typically like one page, maybe two, where they talk about your objective, your education, the skills or core competencies that you have, the essential work experience that you had and what your duties were in that role, and then any recognitions or awards that you have. And it's totally fine if you currently have a resume rather than a CV. The main thing that you just want to make sure is that's highlighted are the skills and the experiences that you have that would make you attractive for the position that you're applying for. Now, if we contrast that with a CV, as you can see, the CV has this kind of pretty specific format for things that would be relevant to a research career. So we first are going to highlight your education. That would list, where you are currently attending undergrad. Oftentimes people will list their major and their GPA. You would have research or work positions that you've held, as well as a brief description of what you did in those positions. You want to highlight any rewards you may have received. And then further along in your research career, you would also be involved in things like publications and conferences, service, memberships in research societies. And so those are pieces that as you move further along would be added to the CV. Now let's talk a little bit more about the specifics of this stuff. So firstly, some things that you want to be sure to do. Using clear and simple language. So if you gave this to your friend, to a family member, would they be able to understand what skills you're highlighting and your interests that you're describing? Also, we really want to be tailoring things here, right? So we've talked about there's so many different kinds of research labs and positions. You want to be sure to explain how, like, or what you did and basically how that is relevant to what they're looking for. So you want really specific examples with numbers, such as how many projects you worked on or how many students there were, and also how your research interests align with what they are focusing on in their lab. And then, like I said, aligning with what the lab's doing. So the skills that you already have that would make you a really good fit. Um, Publications are not the same as current work. So I think what we want to highlight there is that, like, if you were working on a paper, but it's not published yet, that's like a work in progress, right? That's a little different than a publication that's been peer reviewed and is formally available. Also reviewing listings, lab pages, looking at the investigator, all of those things. Oh, I'm so sorry. Now I understand the difference between publications and current work. I'm 1 second. Okay. So I think what we were trying to get at there is that sometimes what the lab is currently working on is not exactly the same as what they've published. Is that right, Dr. Lustig?
Yeah, so what you want to
Yeah.
take a look at is, particularly their current publications within the
Mm.
past couple of years. So if you contact me about something that I did in 2010, there's a very good chance that the lab has moved on and has started something new. Whereas, if you use Google Scholar and sort by date, it will put the more current ones, and often even things that folks may have not had peer reviewed yet, but that are sort of their papers in progress that they've put up onto bioRxiv or SciArchive. And those are really great if you can find those, because that means this is something that's a really active project in the lab. And so
Mhm.
definitely take a look at that and see if it might be something that appeals to your interests.
Perfect. Yeah, thanks for clarifying that. So we're really trying to highlight that you want to be in the know, right? You want to be prepared to understand what they're currently doing. And so their current publications, the more recent papers that they're putting out, that's oftentimes more reflective of their current research. And then also their lab pages are a way to assess if they list current projects on there, as well as using the NIH reporter tool to look up the professor themselves, the principal investigator. And their current research. And then finally, because you just put all this work into making your CV and your resume, make sure that you send it to them when you reach out to them. What are a couple of things that you don't want to do? Well, the first one is not proofreading. So making sure that you are spelling things correctly. There aren't typos, particularly with people's names. There's also, the error of accidentally copying and pasting an email for something else and then sending it to the wrong person. That's pretty unfortunate. We definitely don't want to be doing that. You're trying to contact Dr. Lustig and then you're like, hello, Dr. So and so, and it's a completely different name. That wouldn't reflect very well. Also, you don't want to send too many emails. Like we said, professors receive a lot of emails every day. We want to be respectful of people's time and the fact that it can take time for people to respond. Also, we don't want to be too vague. So saying things like, I love working with humans or I love psychology is very broad. It's not communicating the depth of knowledge that you have or the specific skills that you want to gain. So we want to be more specific than that. Also, just like what we were saying with, what they're currently working on, we don't want to propose learning about something that the lab isn't doing, or asking to do things that would be beyond what an undergraduate research position would be working on. We kind of need to work stepwise, right? We gain the skills and then we advance to the next level and set of responsibilities in a lab. And then finally, if it requires a cover letter, we don't want to be too personal. So this is something that comes up actually a lot within clinical psychology. And there are differing perspectives on this, but generally it's kind of the recommendation that we're not divulging our entire personal life within our application. We're kind of sticking to the broader reason for our interests and just kind of highlighting what those interests are rather than being incredibly personal within those applications.
All right, now I will talk a little bit about the steps in the process. And here I'm going to focus on sort of the more formal or external opportunity applications. So this would be for things like if you're applying to one of the REUs at a different institution, like Jess was talking about, if you're applying for SROP, and this is basically a situation where the person may not ever get a chance to talk to you in person beforehand, as opposed to if you're just applying to somebody's lab and you are in their class, like this is how you're going to introduce yourself to them. So there may be different application components to that. Usually it will be something like asking for different demographic questions. It may ask for your transcript. Often the most important parts are your statement of interest, or sometimes called a personal statement or a statement of purpose, your letters of reference, and then there may be an interview. So there might be a Zoom interview or maybe an in-person interview. So, in demographic questions, so here we often ask about what we call our RMF or RACO merit criteria. So we may ask some things about, what is your what is the income background from your family? Because we may be targeting folks who haven't had an opportunity to participate in research. We may ask about do you have a sustained commitment to diversity? We may ask about your social, economic, or economic status. Are you a first generation student or the first generation in your family? So we're just kind of really trying to get to know you and say, is this the kind of thing that are you the kind of student who's really going to benefit, let's say, from a program like STAR or from a program like SROP? Transcript is usually just kind of checking out to make sure that this program is going to be something that you can handle along with your academic responsibilities, because these summer programs or like research programs that you're doing along with your academics are great, but when you're going to college, getting your grades is still, priority number one. Statement of interest is going to be where people are really assessing your fit with the lab. And then letters of reference are going to be basically statements either from, if you're just starting out, some of them might be professors that you've taken in classes, but sometimes it can also be your employer. They'll usually specify for you where those letters should come from. And then again, there may also be an interview. So we'll talk a little bit about these. A program may seek applicants with some specific characteristics. So one tough one, and I know this is challenging for many of our international students, a lot of the programs are for US citizens, but there are some that will take international students. So check that out. And we do have some of those on our Google Sheet as well. Are you underrepresented in your field? Again, some programs will ask for that. For some, it doesn't matter. Sometimes we may target transfer students because they may have come from a school where there weren't a lot of research opportunities. So we want to prioritize them for research opportunities that are available now. Some programs will target freshmen and sophomores because they're trying to get people off to an early start. Other programs are going to target juniors and seniors because they're trying to get people right before they're ready to apply for graduate school and give them that extra boost and that extra stuff to put onto their CV. And likewise, often there's a strong interest is, are you interested in graduate school? Because that's what many of these programs are designed to prepare you for. Your transcript, if you're a University of Michigan student, both your official and unofficial electronic transcript are available through Wolverine Access. So you don't need to do anything special, just log into your Wolverine Access. If you are at another institution, again, ask your advising office and they can certainly help you find that if you can't find it through your university's webpage. And again, we're usually looking at things like, do you have a good academic standing? Have you taken relevant courses? Oops, I'm not sure why that changed. There we go. Some programs may have a minimum expectation for your GPA. And often there's this application essay. It's a statement of interest. So as Jess was saying, don't be vague. If you say, I love all areas of psychology, or I would be happy in any lab, that's nice to hear, but most of us are really interested in people who are interested in our lab. So we want you to be very passionate about the kinds of things that you're going to be doing while you're working with us. So really spend the time here to focus in on what the person you're applying to, the kind of research that they're doing. Do be, upfront here about your qualifications. This is not the time to be shy and bashful. So if you have relevant qualifications, especially your technical skills, anything that goes under the transferable skills. So, if you have used R to analyze survey data, even if you did it in the context of a class, go ahead and mention that. If you have programming skills, that's often something that's really useful in a lab. If you have conducted surveys, for your job, or even sometimes, customer service things, a lot of things that will come in handy in other employment situations during classes will also come in handy in a research lab. Don't be overly altruistic. This kind of goes with the, don't be vague. I'm destined to help people, or I'm going to change the world. Again, this goes along with the be specific about why this is the research that you're passionate about. Do demonstrate good written communication skills by proofreading your statement. If you have grammar or spelling errors in, that's just unfortunately an easy way to weed people out. So double check it, get your friend to read it, just look it over and try to make sure it's well polished. If you don't have a lot of qualifications, that's okay. You can just rely more on your passion and on the skills that you have been able to build. It's okay if you don't have much research experience. That's why we are looking at you for this program, so that you can get the research experience. If you do have resource limitations, you can talk about that. So you can say, coming from this disadvantaged background of, let's say, being at a smaller school, I was not familiar with neuroscience research, but I did A, B, and C in order to learn more about my goals. So maybe I didn't have a chance to work in a lab where I was working with animals, but I did work at a veterinary clinic, and that gave me those kinds of skills. Or maybe I didn't have a chance to do big scale data analysis in my classes, but I did, take these online videos and learn a little bit more how to do this stats program. So wherever you see a place where your skills might transfer, it doesn't matter where those skills come from, go ahead and mention them, but just try to fit them to what the research is that's going on in the lab. So the next component, you may often be asked for letters of reference. They should not be people who are related to you. So we generally do not want a letter from your mom or from your uncle. They may think that you're the greatest person in the world, but that's not as relevant. They should be from people like professors, maybe work supervisors or volunteer supervisors if you've led a group at your university. So it could be the faculty advisors for the group that you've led. It should demonstrate your social skills, your maturity, your motivation, and your ability to work independently. We're looking for people who are proactive, who are going to follow through on what they're asked to do, and who are going to ask questions and really be interested in the work. So anything that they can do to sort of express that. So, they're usually trying to gauge how you work rather than how you are in class. So, just because you turn in all your assignments on time, that's not what we're looking for. We're looking for the person who is, hey, they asked questions, they did a great job in their discussions, they took leadership roles in their groups. Those are often things that we may be looking for more. If you get an interview, if you are interviewing for something at a different school, then in many cases that might be over Zoom. If you are interviewing for something at your own institution, it will often be in person. And it's usually the last component of the interview process. So you do want to practice for that. So ask your friend, give them a list of common interview questions. You can find those online pretty quickly. And just practice with a friend, practice in the mirror. Come prepared with questions about your own. The question that you will almost certainly be asked is, do you have any questions? And if you just sit there with a blank stare and look at us, then that doesn't do the best conveyance of your strong interest in the lab. So kind of prep ahead of time a couple questions that you may have about the research that's going on in the lab. Ask some questions about the mentorship. Ask some questions about, hey, are there opportunities for journal clubs? Can I go to lab meeting? Do things to show your interest in the research and also your commitment to the lab. If you have any weaknesses or gaps, talk about how you plan to address that issue. So if you know that they're looking for a particular skill and you haven't had a chance to build that yet, you can say, I haven't had a chance to do this yet, but I'm really excited for it. And so I would love for you to point me to any kind of tutorials for that. And I'd be happy to work on those as part of my time in the lab. Another good thing is after the interview, keep yourself in mind of the person, follow up with a short thank you email. And this doesn't have to be anything fancy. It can just be a, dear whoever you met with, I really enjoyed our meeting today. I'm very excited about the work that's going on in the lab. If you can mention something specific that they talked about, like a particular project, and say like, I was really excited about what you were talking about in your research on motivation and incentive, and I would love to be a part of that. That will also show that you were paying attention in the interview. And again, restate your interest and excitement about the project, proofread the email, use your titles, follow all the things that you would for the cold email. But again, this is just a wrap up of your meeting. And now we'll get to the tough question. What if I don't get one this year? And some additional helpful hints. So first, if you don't get a research program or position right away, don't be discouraged. It's probably not you. There are just always fewer positions than there are applicants. And getting rejected from a few positions, it happens to everyone. There are some helpful hints and resources that can help you be a more competitive applicant on the next time you apply. And we're going to go through some of those hints and resources for the rest of the workshop. This was especially hard during COVID. And I would say most labs now are back to in-person. Most labs are back to doing their international research if that was something that they were involved in beforehand. But they may be running with fewer people because a lot of times we adapted during the pandemic to doing things online. And sometimes that has turned out to be more efficient. So we keep on doing it. If you are working with clinical populations or immunodeficient populations, there's going to be additional precautions that you have to take or additional training that you have to do. But again, that will be something that the lab should help you with. There are also, as a silver lining, there's opportunities for online or virtual research. So I know I've worked with students from like UT Dallas and UT Austin sometimes over the summer because they had some skills and they were interested in a project that was going on in our lab. So we just conducted all of our meetings via Zoom. And so that has become more normative and available as well. So keep an eye out for those opportunities. Research often involves multiple stages and pieces. And so if you can build your skills along any of these, either in your classes or in your employment, or even just spending a little extra time online doing some tutorials. So data cleaning and analysis is a big one. All research labs use data. And so people who can work with data are going to be especially attractive. If you've done literature reviews for your classes, keep an eye on those skills, mention those. If you've written a term paper with a lot of them and you've used Otera or used some of the other literature management tools, mention that on your CV, mention that when you're in the interview and talking with the person. Writing manuscripts, again, that's something if you wrote a research paper for your class, you can mention that as well. You can sometimes attach that if it comes, if the person that you may be interviewing with has some questions. If you didn't get a position, again, there may be many reasons. Oftentimes, we're just interviewing with a lot of people and we have to make some tough decisions. So again, don't take it personally, but do take a look at some of these and see if any of them apply to you and if there are places that you can improve. So, one of them is you customize your cold email and your application essays. If you send out an email and it's very obvious that you sent it out to all the psychology faculty in the department, that's an almost instant delete. If it's a very vague email, as Jess was saying before, that just says, I want to do research, that's going to be less successful than an application that talks specifically about, here is research that I see that's going on in your lab. I've read your papers. Here's why I would really like to be a part of that. On the other hand, you don't want to be too specific. So it's often a good idea, even if you notice a specific paper, to say, put the qualifier on there and say, I'm really interested in this work that you're doing on Parkinson's patients and how attention might contribute to their walking. But I would also be really delighted to hear about any other related work that you might have going on in the lab. One big thing is, do not completely rely on ChatGPT for writing the email. It has some giveaways that we can usually tell, and a lot of people have a negative reaction to that. I know that can be challenging if this is your first time writing an email, maybe you're really nervous about it, or maybe English is not your first language and you want some help checking the grammar and so on. If you do use ChatGPT to help you with an email, ask your GSI or your TA, ask a professor or an advisor, have them look it over and just say, does this sound natural? Does this sound like me? Or are there sort of the AI signs for it? If English is your second language and you're using it to help your English writing, you should also consider about how you're going to think about that in the interview and make sure that you really practiced your responses. You may want to stay with the more low-key AIs like Grammarly and so on that help with grammar rather than having a completely different voice in your email than you do in your live interview. And again, not all factors are within your control. Sometimes the lab is at capacity. If you are looking for a summer position, we usually try to pay people for those, and the lab may just have already spent its money or allocated its money that it has for summer students. On the other hand, there may be some where you have a particular skill and that is or is not what they are looking for. So for my lab, being bilingual wouldn't necessarily be an asset, but for, let's say, Dr. Coleman's lab, where she studies bilingualism, or Dr. Boland's lab, where they study bilingualism, that would be a huge asset for their lab. Don't burn the bridges. If the person emails you and says, I'm really sorry, we're not able to accommodate you at this time, we don't have any positions open, even if it occurs after the interview, it's fine to be disappointed, but you should write them back and say, thank you so much for considering me. I would still be delighted if you have something that opens up later on. Is it okay if I contact you, or if you could please keep me in mind? That's going to go much better than, just writing back, either not responding or writing back with a sarcastic or angry response. If you are changing labs or if you're changing situations, again, during the interview, even if you had a bad experience and that's the reason that you're switching, you want to not really badmouth a previous employer or a previous supervisor. You can just say, if somebody asks you, just say, I don't think that was the right environment or the right fit for me, or it turns out I'm actually much more interested in the kinds of, you can say something like, I really value the experience that I got there, but I'm much more interested in the work that you're doing in your lab. Again, if you can't get experience, a lot of labs may be looking for experience and you're sort of in this back and forth situation of, I want to find experience and get experience to be in a lab. In order to be accepted into a lab, I have to have experience. Again, review the slides and the video from this workshop on how to get involved in research and what to do if you can't find a position this year. We go through a lot of different things there about how you can build your research skills to make you a more attractive candidate. Again, you can do things like if you're doing academic papers, even for your class, rather than managing your citations by hand, learn to use one of these common programs that we often use in the labs as well for our own research, and then mention that on your CV. So that's a skill that you can build. Data management or basic coding resources. There's a lot of open source options for this. There's tons of things. So again, if you're at Michigan, you have free access both to Coursera and to LinkedIn Learning. And I encourage you to get the certifications and put those on your CV. If you're not at Michigan, Coursera has some others that are open, or check with your university and see if they have a subscription that would let you do the same thing. Statsthinking21.org. Again, that's a great resource that somebody put together that just, it gives you free tutorials on the basics of R and stats. R, for those of you who don't know, is probably the most common program that people use now for analyzing their data. So if you have skills in R, that's going to be something that's going to make you attractive to a lot of different labs. Python is another program that is very popular with many labs. So that helps you put together different experiments and different surveys. And again, here's a great website for learning that. If you're at Michigan, CSCAR, so it has a ton of different workshops. It will have things on GitHub, which is a programming workshop, on R, on Python. So just go to that link or look them up on Google. Keep an eye out for workshops that look like they might be interesting for you. And again, if you're not a Michigan student, just check to see if there are resources similar available at your institution. And if you're not sure where to look, go to your advising office. They will be delighted to help you. Like, that's what they are there for. At some universities, again, including Michigan, the libraries will often hold data or stats workshops. They'll often have programming workshops, how to put together a website. There's just a lot of different resources that you can use. So if you want to learn some other basic concepts about stats, some others, free-ish online training courses or certifications. Sorry about that. LinkedIn Learning, again, they will often let you take some things for free, and then it may be if your university doesn't have a subscription and you want the certificate, you might have to pay a small fee for that. But even just saying I have the skills and I can do this is going to help you a lot. IRBs, so this is basically how we get the ethical approval for our research. It's something we don't love doing often as professors and graduate students. So if you know how to navigate it, that can be a very useful skill. And again, there's usually going to be online training that is free that your university will offer, and showcase that on your CV and just say, have completed online training in XYZ IRB, and I'm ready to go ahead and manage those kinds of protocols. If all else fails, ask if you can join the lab unofficially. I've had several students, sort of, if we didn't have room on any of our research teams currently, but somebody's like super interested in the work, I'm like, well, if you want to come to our lab meetings, you're welcome to do that and to join in. Or if a journal club, if you want to join our journal clubs, and then the people who keep on showing up, when we do have an opening, they're going to be given the first priority. If you feel comfortable, if they, especially if you do get to an interview stage and then you do get turned down after that, when you're responding to the email that they send you saying, we're really sorry, we weren't able to take you on at this time, another way to continue to express your interest would be to say, I'm still super interested in your lab. Do you have any recommendations for any courses or training that I could take that would make me better qualified at the next time? And again, if you do that, that makes you even more attractive to us as a candidate because it shows that you're willing to put in the work. Um, Again, ask your advising office for research, how to find research opportunities at your department. If you are here at Michigan, we have this research and service learning fair that's coming up. This is going to be a great opportunity because labs that are looking for RAs are going to be there. They're going to have little booths and tables that they will be at telling you about their labs. So that's an awesome opportunity to come talk to the graduate students, talk to the lab managers. I would say bring your CV to that because then if you talk to somebody whose lab you find interesting, you can give them their CV. And that in some way, that's like giving them your card and keeping you on their minds because now they have this physical reminder of you and they're like, oh yeah, this seemed like a really great prepared person for our position. If you have a departmental newsletter, I know our psychology undergraduate newsletter, a lot of people will post their research positions there. If there is a brown bag or colloquium in a talk or a talk series, show up to that, find out about the research that's going on at the university. And then if you see one that looks like really interesting to you, go up and ask the speaker and say, I really found this work fascinating. Is there any possibility that you have an opening in your lab or that I could come to your lab meetings and learn more about this? And the speaker will usually be super flattered that you're that interested in what they just talked about, that they will often find a way to try to make this work for you. And again, psychology is such a huge topic that we can often fit in research that actually goes on in other departments. So psychiatry is an obvious fit, but there's research at the business school that goes on that's very relevant to psychology. There's research at kinesiology that goes on that's very relevant to psychology. There's research in neurology. I mean, just in communication. So look across different things and see if there's some kind of link to psychology. And in many cases, you can find a way to make that work. And then you just usually have to find a psychology faculty member who will be a sponsor for you so you can get the credit within the psychology department. Especially if you are looking for a postbac or for summer research opportunity, academic Twitter can be your friend. Look for researchers who you find interesting, see if they have a Twitter page or now a Blue Sky page, and who do they follow or interact with? Oftentimes people will advertise their opportunities there. Learn about new researchers in your topic of interest. So again, if somebody's a brand new assistant professor, like this is their first year being a professor, they're often building up a new lab. And so keep an eye on them because they are often the people who are most likely to need new research assistants to help them build their lab. It's also often super exciting to get started, right when the new professor is because you're doing the brand new research just from the very ground up. Twitter often gives you an idea too of what the important papers and issues are in the field. And again, just, establish your own Twitter presence. It's a low stakes opportunity to network and just be professional. If you want to take a look at some examples of this for how graduate students have done this, I would say look up Cody Cow's Twitter from Michigan. Mike Demidenko is a former STAR mentor, and they are sort of masters of using Twitter to network with people in the field and just sort of see how they are interacting with other folks and use that as an example. Do be professional. And this is another thing too. When you are applying for research positions, think about what your online presence looks like. Because often when somebody emails us or gets in touch with us, if we are seriously considering them, we will often Google stalk them even before bringing them in for an interview. So if you have a Twitter page that you've said some things on there that maybe are not what you want to represent yourself as you are applying for a research position, what you may want to do is, have that one be a separate account and then have an account that is, more your official one. and make that your more public one. Again, Twitter and social media, frequent posts of opportunities. You're going to see from the research assistants themselves and other coordinators. You're going to see PhD opportunities on there. You're going to see postdoc opportunities. There's just a lot available. So just to give you an example, this is just, a selection that somebody went through on one day of finding a bunch of different opportunities for different PhD programs. And it will be one of those things where finding the first couple of people to get started is going to be maybe a little bit challenging, but once you find the researchers in your area who are interesting to you and who are active, then there's a reason it's called a network. And so you'll see who they follow and who follows them, and you'll gradually be able to sort of build your database for that. All right, and I will turn it back over to Jess.
Great. So I know that we've covered a lot of information. Thank you, those of you still on the call who've been hanging on the full time. We have a couple of frequently asked questions that we wanted to cover first. The first one is if you're not sure about the research topic. So like we said, this is really common. It's honestly a good thing to be exploring a lot of different options early in your career. So think about your coursework, think about the extracurriculars you've been a part of, or even just, your online presence. What are the things that you're interested in? What documentaries do you watch or podcasts do you listen to? What are the things that interest you? And then finally, you can also look through listings of research positions that are available or lab websites that can also kind of help formalize those interests. Another thing would be doing research outside of your department or institution. So definitely psychology is a very interdisciplinary field. So that's definitely encouraged. If you're doing research for credits, check out the department rules in order to make sure that you are kind of hitting the requirements there. And then also, most faculty members are accommodating in terms of making opportunities for people, but you do want to be mindful about communicating whatever needs you may have to be engaged in research, and you want to do that in a proactive and timely manner to also respect the lab that you are a part of. When is a good time to start? Early is always the best, but it's never too late. So it's possible to do research after graduation. That was something that I raised in my path of doing that post-bac position. So it's really common to do a couple years of research before applying to graduate school, even after you finish with undergrad. And it's also about passion and commitment. That's going to really convey, your experience and your abilities. And then finally, what are the things that are valuable from research, even if you think you don't want to be in academia for your career? One is definitely that skills are transferable. You're going to be learning about critical thinking. You're going to be learning maybe how to be conscientious about data, privacy, ethics, many different things. And then also careful phrasing in your resume, right? You can apply things to a lot of different settings, and you can really highlight different skills from different experiences that you've had across different jobs or positions you may hold in the future. So just some final words of wisdom. No two paths are alike, right? This is sometimes in some ways an uphill battle of finding positions, applying to them. There's going to be things that don't work out, but there are going to be things that work out as well. And we really encourage you to aspire to, work towards the things that you are passionate about and go ahead and accomplish them, because we need more energetic, passionate researchers like all of you, I hope, will become. So we'll leave you with that. And thank you for being here today. So this is our email if you want to reach out with any questions. I'm seeing some questions in the chat about the lecture recording, which I do believe will be sent out, Dr. Lustig?
Yes, it will.
Excellent. And And let's see, I think another question we got was whether we could get a link for the spreadsheet of research or internship opportunities. So that will be within the slides. I think there's a QR
Mhm.
code you can scan. So once you get that recording, you can go ahead and access that spreadsheet from there.
Yep. And then I did see a couple questions from people who had turned in an application for our STAR winter program. If you did a CV instead of a resume, again, that's totally fine at this stage. We didn't, one of the reasons that we do STAR is that we know people may not have known the difference before they did the application. And so the whole purpose of our winter program is to help mentor you on these things. So don't worry about that at all.
Mhm. Any other questions that people have more immediately? No? Yeah, thank you for coming.
All right. Well, good luck to everybody in your applications. We hope that this was useful for you and got you, both excited about the possibilities, and then also realistic about, making sure that you allocate enough time and how to prepare yourself. So good luck, and we will hope to see you in the labs.
Yeah, take
Have a
care.
great night, everybody.